Are you curious about Gestalt language processing? You are not alone. Join me, Corinne Smoose, and speech therapy PD for our podcast, The Gestalt Get Together. Our episodes try to balance the enthusiasm and excitement about GLP and its associated intervention ideas, as well as a healthy dose of skepticism about how to understand and integrate this paradigm shift into your career and the field at large. We hope that you can get together with us to learn more about Gestalts.
Welcome to SLP Learning Series, a podcast series presented by SpeechTherapyPD.com. The SLP Learning Series explores various topics of speech-language pathology. Each season dives deeper into a topic with a different host and guests who are leaders in the field. Some topics include stuttering, AAC, sports concussion, teletherapy, ethics, and more. Each episode has an accompanying audio course on SpeechTherapyPD.com and is available for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. Now, come along with us as we look closer into the many topics of speech-language pathology. Welcome to Season 6, Ease Into AAC. As a global leader in assistive communication, Toby Dynavox understands how overwhelming it can be for families, users, and even seasoned clinicians to take on the challenges of identifying and funding an assistive communication device. We are eager to support speech-language pathologists and other professionals in assessing and implementing AAC solutions for their clients. Our website, tobydynavox.com, and our free learning hub, learn.tobydynavox.com, are full of therapy materials, classroom resources and curriculum, and hardware and software trainings to help our customers embrace AAC with confidence. Additionally, the Toby Dynavox for Professionals program allows you to register for free versions of our software to use with clients.
Welcome to the podcast mini-series Ease Into AAC, presented by SpeechTherapyPD.com. Thanks for joining us for our final episode, Working with Families Using AAC. This audio course is offered for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. If your state license requires live CEUs, be sure to complete all course modules before the end of today on your SpeechTherapyPD.com account. I am your host, Kate Thomson, and I am a certified practicing speech pathologist from Australia. I have worked with people using AAC for the past 10 years, and it's an area I'm incredibly passionate about supporting people to find their voice to shout to the world who they are. As the host of this podcast, I receive compensation from Speech Therapy PD, but have no other financial or non-financial relationships to disclose. Today, we are also joined by Judith Likavec Davis, an SLP in California who currently serves as an AAC specialist, consulting with a focus on developing functional treatment programs and increasing functional communication skills and positive therapeutic outcomes, which is what we're all looking for. Judith receives compensation from SpeechTherapyPD.com for joining us today, and is also a speaker for Video Continuing Education, where she also receives compensation. Before we get started and jump into the content of today, just a reminder that we love and encourage questions from our participants. So what you can do is send me an email at kate@speechease.net.au. Any questions that you have, given we're not live today and there's no chat box, feel free to shoot me through any questions whenever they come up when you're listening to this. I'm always happy to chat all things AAC. So let's jump into the topic of today, working with families using AAC, where we'll be talking about how to support families to implement AAC at home. Welcome, Judy.
Kate, I'm so glad to be here. This is such an important topic.
Yes, it's so exciting. And thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and where you are today and how you got there. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I am not yet retired, although I certainly have reached retirement age. I've been an SLP for more than 40 years. I've worked in every single setting that there is and at every level. And functional communication has always been a real important interest of mine. And serving those children without a voice or those clients that don't have a voice is important. And
Yeah.
there are three pillars in special education, and that is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and by extension, belonging. And if
Yeah.
you think about it, all of the children or students we're going to be talking about today do not actually get those needs met. And it's going to take all of us, including parents, which is what we're focusing on today, to try to help them. So I agree. I'm also passionately interested in helping those without a voice be able to communicate.
Yeah. And for those alternative communication methods to be just as valued as speech,
Absolutely.
because they absolutely are. Yeah, beautiful. So can you tell us a little bit about, you mentioned the role of parents. Can you tell us a bit about what is the role of parents in the AAC team?
Well, it's kind of interesting. As I said, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've yet to see any student who did not have active parental involvement ever become an effective communication user. So I would say what the role of a parent is absolutely being a critical member of the team in order to support functional communication in the home and in the community.
Yeah.
And I think why that is so important is for a couple of reasons. When you are an adult teacher or an adult speech therapist, we have our agenda. And children understand that there's discourse rules, that the adult's going to ask the question and I'm going to answer. And so you get really locked into some very strong strictures about question, answer. If a student breaks from that, they may be considered off topic or tangential or interrupting the class or the therapy session. Whereas at home, those strict guidelines are not there. Parents can talk about pets and friends and relatives and toys and foods and anything. And the child is free to make any comment that they choose or ask questions. And so it's really the richest opportunity for a child to practice language because there are no guidelines as far as, well, this is a curriculum we have to stick to. The only curriculum in the home is communication. So my perception of the parent is that they get the chance to do all of the kind of functional communication that we might not actually always get around to in the schools or even in a clinical setting.
Yeah. So all the communication rules are thrown out the window at home. There's not all these social rules or norms that we need to try and develop our communication within. In the classroom, there's very much that, you raise your hand to talk and question answer type relationship, which is very adult directed and very specific to what the teacher's agenda is or what the speech pathologist's agenda is. Whereas at home, you don't have all that. There's a lot of richness and a lot of functional communication. And when I think about my niece, when she was younger, she is speaking, but she used to talk and talk. She's now 16, so you barely hear a word from her. But back then, she just used to talk forever. And her stories would go for so long, but there was no interruptions. Her parents would listen. They would be engaged. They'd ask more questions. And it was okay that that's how she was expressing herself and sharing what had happened for her day that day. Whereas in the school environment, that would have been shut down because you've got an agenda, you've got to get through the curriculum, you've got to, stay on topic, all of those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's a really important point, is that the at home and in the community is where that really rich autonomous communication starts to really flourish, which is cool to see.
Exactly.
Yeah. And how have you found being able to support parents to engage in that role, especially if you are working within the schools? How have you found that relationship, and how have you been able to foster that relationship to support parents?
Well, once the child is at a K through 12 setting, having access to parents becomes tougher and tougher. I don't know what Australian IEP meetings look like, but if they're anything like, meetings here in the United States, there are 25 pages of important paperwork to get through where there is not a lot of training and opportunities for discussion, demonstration, and what have you. So, boy, I can't emphasize enough early identification and development of communication before the child goes to school. Let's say like going through an early intervention program or a clinical program where there's more opportunities for parent training, parent demonstration, actual hands-on modeling, where a parent can read online model without expectation, and they don't really know what that is. They could read that 100 times and not really know, oh, I don't have to press every single icon on the device or on the communication board. I can just pick a few things. So it is really tough to actually get times with parents once a child is in school.
Yeah.
Every single, I should say my current role, I'm actually working in Oregon as an AAC specialist for various schools and service districts. And every meeting that I participate in, I always ask parents, can I schedule some time to show you some things, to review some things? And the parents always appear very interested, but they mostly don't take me up on that.
Yeah,
And that's really one of the shortfalls of parents are just so busy. And, if I can even get back to some ideas about, why aren't they more interested in getting a dedicated device for their child? The insurance company might pay for it. The school might actually provide it. There may even be a grant. Why aren't the parents more interested in supplying their child with a communication device? And so I think there's some myths associated with AAC that run very deep in our parents. And some of those might be the stigma potentially attached to having a device in their child not fitting in and looking very different, or the belief that the device will shortchange their verbal development or their language or their speech. They might feel that the child is going to become reliant on the device. And of course, every single thing that we know is just the opposite. All my experience has shown me I might have a student who might make 5 utterances verbally or vocally, and you give them a device and all of a sudden they're making all kinds of more utterances in all kinds of different ways. So that's obviously something that we need to dispel. But I think maybe perhaps the most limiting excuse, the most limiting reason maybe why parents are perhaps not as fully on board as I would like them to be is I honestly think that they think the following, which is, well, I know what my child wants. And that I think is the biggest impediment to this. And I've actually heard teachers say that as well, as if me telling you what I want is the sum total of what I would want to be communicating in life.
Yeah.
And so when I do talk with parents, the very first thing that I talk to them about is, well, we're trying to do more than just have your child be able to tell us what he wants to eat or what toy he wants to play with or what book or what video he wants to watch. This is not just about preferences. This is about us being able to teach your child how to communicate symbolically, and how to express thoughts and ideas and intentions and engage with others and to make comments and ask questions and participate. That has nothing to do with just, I want mac and cheese, right? So once a parent kind of hears that and they see that there is a whole other range of communication possibilities for their child, and also when they start recognizing that other people besides themselves are going to need to be communicating with their child, they might be more inclined to want something like a device. I think another impediment to certainly, maybe really getting rich use of an AAC device going is, parents are pretty beleaguered. And, this may be the only child they have at home, or they may actually have several children that have learning difficulties or complex communication needs or complex physical needs. And so it just feels like, oh my gosh, just one more thing for me to do.
Yeah.
And, technology might be kind of scary to them. Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to figure out this device? How am I going to start it? How am I going to program it? How am I going to? And so one of the things I do is I start with low tech and to just demystify the whole process, to introduce this symbolic communication and just really start just letting parents know that what we're really looking for is the ability for a child to communicate without just using behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Because the majority of kids that don't have a communication device or some way to communicate will use behavior to communicate.
Yeah.
And for anyone that has worked in early intervention or, I would say all through elementary school, there's tantruming, biting, hitting, throwing stuff, kicking, shoving, pinching, pulling hair, leaving the room, breaking stuff. That's all a way of refusing, rejecting, and trying to say no, right? Imagine if the child had even a low tech, choice board to say, no, I don't like it. Please help. Give me, I need a break. Maybe some of those maladaptive behaviors could be minimized. So that's kind of where I really try to get with parents, which is these very same behaviors, once they get entrenched, can actually follow the young person through their entire life. And they will be an 18-year-old throwing something. It's not quite as cute as a 2-year-old throwing something. So that's some of the imperative that I really try to get through to parents.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing is really helping parents to see beyond right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, you might be able to understand what they want. And right now, you might be able to, deal with those challenging behaviors that the person's using to communicate because they're 2 or 6 or a little bit littler. But what happens when they're older and, some of our little people become big people and they're, quite strong and firm and can cause some real damage if they don't learn a different way to advocate for themselves, which is what all those no, don't stop, I don't like it, all of those sorts of words and access to communication is doing. It's advocating for themselves. And I think that's really important. And then, thinking about, well, it's not just what they want and need. As we get older, our thoughts are so huge, and being able to have a way to effectively communicate what those are all year, all life is really important as well. One thing I find really quite helpful is talking to families about, what happens if you're not here? What happens if there's a car accident tomorrow and you're not able to support your child anymore? Then who looks after them, and how are they meant to understand what it is that they want, even if wants and needs is all you think communication is? If you're not here tomorrow to understand those wants and needs, how else is somebody else meant to support your child?
Absolutely.
And although that's a really tough conversation, it can be a bit of an eye-opener for them to see, oh, okay, this is bigger than just me and how I interact with my child. There is so much more to this. We also, I'm not sure if you've used it much, Judy, but we have the Pragmatic Profile, which is readily accessible online. Have you used it before?
Yes.
Yeah. I find that a really nice tool to go through with families and teachers as well, to show that range of what communication is to, you first go through, well, how do they get their wants and needs across, blah, blah, blah. And then it's, how do they tell you something's wrong? How do they give you their opinion? How do they ask a question if they need more information? How do they direct you to where to go? Like all of those other things that we do with language, which helps to show people that it's not this limited wants and needs, it's everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So what are some of the most questions you get from families? Is there anything that comes up that's different to a misconception?
Let me think. Well, I think there's always then, when I start giving kind of some do's and don'ts, there's always then lots of questions about that, right? Well, how come you wouldn't do that or something like that? So I do have lots of do's and don'ts, like, don't slap your child's hand if they are just kind of like hitting a key over and over, model instead another word or do something like that. So sometimes there's a lot of really good questions related to the feedback and instruction that I'm giving.
Yeah.
But I think something that parents always ask me about, and it's sort of like, in a way, you're kind of wondering if they're sort of looking for a way to find a reason that this device is going to work for them, because they then always ask me about customizing the device. How do we customize the device and add vocabulary and do this and do that? And that's oftentimes one of the first things that they want to find out about. Yeah. And, I'll just show them, let's say, a core word page that has 50 different words on there, that any one of those words would be a fabulous place to start. Any 10 of these words, if your kid could know, would be super. And then if we go to, let's say some quick fires or some other kinds of engagement sorts of vocabulary, how about all of these? And so that's one of the things that I try to do, is steer parents that I will show you how to customize the device, but don't get caught up on that just because your child wants a picture of a dinosaur on there doesn't mean that they couldn't use this high-tech or low-tech system. And then I think the other thing I certainly try to do is make sure that parents understand the role of multimodality communication in all of it. We can continue to use pictures, videos, signs, gestures, cards, boards, the device in and of itself, so that some settings and some interactions, some activities might be more prone to a particular kind of communication support, and other situations might require something else. So I think that's something parents sometimes, really want to focus on. And then I'd say another thing that they always ask me about is, and this is usually for kids that already have a device, they want their child to talk in full sentences. And I know that there's a lot of SLPs that want their students to be talking in full sentences, and that's okay. I'm not going to take it up with you, but my own approach is functional communication. And that for the most part, the children we're talking about will always have a communication partner, so that even if they just select one symbol, I'm going to be their partner that's going to be interpreting what that symbol means. They don't need to spend 3 minutes trying to formulate a whole sentence, because I'll be able to interpret, oh, you want something, or you like this, or you need help with this, right? So I do try to definitely inform parents about normal language acquisition, which is children do not typically begin combining words to form utterances till they have about 35 to 50 words. Yeah. So here we are, wanting sentences or phrases when our student only has 5-6 words. Well, how about if we think about a normal language model? Yeah. So that's something parents bring up. Yeah. Oh, let me think.
And I think it's also about having a variety of words too. You can have 50 nouns and you're still not going to be able to make a sentence. Yes. So making sure we're looking at the variety of words that's modeled, not just the, getting to that number, but making sure that if you're working for sentences. You've got lots of different types of words there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Mhm. So let's see. I think those are mostly what parents bring up. And what do you normally hear from parents when you're working with them?
Yeah. One of the biggest ones is, how do I carry it around with me all the time? From a really practical point of view, how do I remember it? And I talk about, well, you remember to take your phone everywhere. You remember to take your keys with you. Like it's just about building a habit and over time finding ways to reinforce that habit. And then it just becomes part of your normal, all right, I've got my phone, I've got my purse, I've got my keys, and I've got the device. So I'm taking that with me. And the other thing is around, well, what do I do in the shower or at the pool or going to the beach, and talking about, like you said, that multimodal communication and making sure that we're not just focusing on only one type of AAC, but looking at all of the types, I think would be some of the biggest questions that I get.
Something else that parents talk to me about, and I think, this is, once again, kind of a hot issue, I think, about, making sure that all children have the most robust form of communication possible, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes a student will use a device as a projectile. They don't want to, and parents report that they don't want to use a communication device for communication purposes. Now they're looking for YouTube videos or video games or fun stuff. And if you think about it, communication apps are actually pretty boring by comparison to everything else. My gosh, little stick figures. They're not even animated stick figures, for goodness sake, right? Holy cow. And here we are trying to go, oh, wow, we've got this great program for you. You have to do all the work. And so, no wonder kids, quote unquote, don't like it. So that's something that I frequently heard from parents, where they just said, oh, well, we tried that already. And, once again, it's reframing the conversation about what the purpose of the device is for. This is just a tool to use during language exchange, fun and functional activities, engagement, reading a book, playing, being in the kitchen together. This is not something that you just put in front of the child and just expects them to be able to start talking. And I would say that is the biggest misconception or myth that I've heard, is that out of the box, the device is just going to start talking for the child.
Yeah.
And I've even had some teachers think that. So this is not just, we have such a faith in technology, where it really is rather miraculous, that I honestly think people might not realize that it might take years for a child to actually become a functional communicator on that. And that means a lot of effort on your part. I think people are disappointed to hear that.
Yeah, people are looking for the quick fix, the magic wand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what we do here, and I assume it's much the same over in the States, is we talk about having, if you're using an iPad with an app, have a dedicated iPad that's just for AAC, and turn guided access on, because of course you're going to want to go and look at YouTube and play games. Like, communication is hard work. It's hard work for us. And as you say, the apps themselves are not very fun or engaging.
No, they're not.
So making sure they know that one's for my communication, and then I can play and do YouTube and all of those sorts of things on this other device. That has been helpful. But again, that comes down to affordability. Can families really afford 2 iPads? Or, where does the funding come from for the communication device specifically? So that's something that we try to work through with them as well.
Kate, something kind of interesting, because I've been doing this a long time. When communication apps first came out, and what people had before that was a manila file folder with columns of words where we color-coded pictures, and and so here you have a device, even with these stick figures that talked. It really was astonishing, amazing, invigorating. Well, we're way past that in terms of, the users that we have today. They're rather jaded. So that's actually maybe one of the biggest instructional, informational pieces that I give to parents, which is I say the app is not cool. What is cool is us, engaging with us, playing with us, doing something fun with us, getting your needs met and feeling calm and regulated. That's what the reward is. Monkeying around on the apps for many kids, it's almost just like a high-tech fidget in a way, right?
Yeah.
So we certainly want to make sure we extend past using the device for that purpose. So getting back to it, it requires a lot of effort.
Yeah.
At Tobii Dynavox, it is our mission to empower people to do what they once did or never thought possible. As a global leader in assistive communication, we strive to provide innovative solutions, support, and resources to individuals, caregivers, and our professional partners. With a variety of hardware and software for diverse users of all age groups, and with various diagnoses, we are your partner throughout the AAC journey and beyond. Learn more at tobiidynavox.com.
I also find, Judy, a lot of the time you said that parents will say they don't want to use the device, or, I bring out the device and they push it away, or they throw it away, or they just walk off. And I have generally found, and they'll say, oh, we've tried devices, it doesn't work. And so one of my questions is always, how did you try it? Because that's one of my first to try and figure out, well, have we done this well in the past? And usually it's that there's been an expectation on the person to use the system to communicate when they're not ready. And so there's a lot of pressure and expectation put on them that they have to use it. And then if they don't use it correctly, they're then in trouble, or they don't get what they want, or they don't get to have that fun, enjoyable interaction with the communication partner. And so, of course, they're going to associate this system with not a good time. So why would you want it to come out? Whenever you see it, you're going to have that fight or flight response of, oh, I don't like this. This means terrible things for me, or hard things for me. So making sure that you, are also talking to families about take away that expectation, and it's just for fun, for you to model with, and to add to what you're communicating, not to add to your day, but to add to what you're already doing, can be a bit helpful as well.
Well, when I watch, my role as consultant is, to just basically be a clinical mentor, someone to, empower, teach, provide reassurance, ideas, that kind of thing. And, when I watch people engaging with the device, with whomever, whatever setting I'm in, the majority of time, it is this question and answer kind of thing. Where's such and such an icon? Can you find such and such a picture? It's this quizzing approach. And when parents are instructed that, there's so many other ways of figuring out what your child knows without necessarily, turning it into this quiz format, right? And even if you are going to do a quiz format, there's a way to turning it into a competition or timing it or something like that. There's a way to make it fun and more interactive rather than, kind of harsh and punitive and boring. So most people just need more ideas for how to use it, right? And how to use it in a way that works for the child. So your question of, well, how was the device rolled out, basically, is the question to ask, isn't it?
Yeah. And what ideas have you found you're commonly giving to people when they do need those extra ideas of how to implement it?
Well, one of the first things that, and this is, going back to some of the previous sessions in this series, to me, part of working with the family is making sure that an appropriate set model was used to determine the capability of the family members, the culture within the home, the expectations, the literacy level, all of that kind of stuff, I think is really, really critical. So doing a really important assessment of family ability is as important a component of success than just me taking a look at, oh, wow, the child's access or their ability to, understand symbolic reasoning.
Yeah.
The child's ability to use the device may even be secondary to those communication partners' abilities. Okay.
Yeah.
So, that is sometimes one of my recommendations too, is I might be more inclined to make a recommendation for a student in a school setting, let's say, if 3 other students in the classroom already have the same device.
Yeah.
Then all of the teaching staff are going to be more comfortable. So therefore the child is going to have more exposure and what have you. So sometimes I actually do the same thing with the parent. I will do a device trial with the parent and say, do any of these just seem more comfortable to you?
Yeah.
And that is getting their initial buy-in. So that's one of my first steps.
I love that.
And then I think another thing that is really, really important is there always has to be this cost-benefit ratio, right? Which is the amount of time a parent has to put into the device. There has to be a requisite reward coming back.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's just the kids that I know or that I've had to work with clinically, but most of those kids have some very troubling behaviors because they don't have a means to communicate.
Yeah.
So, working on, this benefit, which is if we give your child a means to communicate their feeling states and their needs, and if we can get them regulated before they get triggered, boy, there will be a strong benefit to that. So that's another entree that I work with the parents about, tying in some of the behavior the child is already using, right? Like pairing some negative behavior with a symbol and saying, wow, look how quickly we were able to figure out what they needed based upon communication symbols. So that's another way I kind of, get in with the parent and make sure that they're on board with me.
It's a bit like a sales pitch, isn't it? Where you've got to find the pain point and what's that pain point and how can AAC solve that pain point? And then you get the buy-in.
Yes, exactly.
And
buy-in is really, I feel like I am doing sales and marketing, for my job. Another thing I do, I always ask parents, are there any words you want me to be working on? And I started asking this question, a long time ago, but it made even more sense whenever I had access to any parent, because, one parent told me rather cheerfully, she said, my son has never told me in any way, shape, or form that he loves me.
Yeah.
I would just love, is there a heart on there somewhere where he could, press that to let me know that he loves me?
Yeah.
And another parent told me that they took their child to the movies and they spent really an exorbitant amount of money on the movie and the little toy that went with the movie and the popcorn and the treats and the transportation and everything like that. And she said, and I honestly didn't even know if they liked the movie.
Yeah.
And so just basic things such as don't like, I'd love to go again. And, this particular mom said, I wasn't even looking for a thank you. I just wanted to find out, did he enjoy himself?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing we have to realize is, depending upon the population you're working with, in my particular settings, about 70% of the students have ASD. And so, that's a pretty tough group for parents, right? Because they're maybe not getting these kind of reactions from their children. So if we can help them with some of this social emotional based communication. What a gift to these families, right? So
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Judy, that talks to some of the adults I've worked with too, where nobody knows what they like and don't like.
Mhm,
Nobody, their support workers don't know. Parents have usually passed on.
mhm,
So, working with 40, 50-year-old people who haven't had access to AAC their whole lives. And so they
mhm,
might have a sibling or two that are around, but they don't know what they like.
mhm.
And so when you're trying to engage this person, nobody knows. And so finding out, well, what is it do they actually really like and what do they really don't like? They've kind of become quite passive people in their worlds where they just go along with whatever's happening
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
they have to. Nobody has had a way to understand whether they want to or not.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah,
Well,
and so those sorts of things are really helpful for lifelong as well, for meeting new
absolutely.
people, making friends. You need to know what you like and don't like.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
another thing that I'd say is really important working with families is to be really kind, supportive, understanding, and to be as gracious as possible. I do know that, sometimes people working, with families, you might walk into a student's home and there's not a single toy there, right?
Yeah.
All the kid does all day is just play on a phone and they're only two, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like really taking the perspective of, that mom or that parent or that family, which is, well, why aren't there any toys in this house? Well, the kid breaks them all,
Yeah.
or, um, the mom just wants some quiet from the screaming. And if you just give the child your cell phone, they can be, maybe I've got some peace for a little while. So I
Yeah.
always just really try to understand what's going on in the home and be a resource and a support to the family
Yeah.
rather than coming in with my agenda like, well, I know what you need, right? So
Yeah.
I listen first and then I make my recommendations after some careful consideration. And I think
Yeah.
parents, appreciate that and they're more likely once again to comply with anything I recommend if it
Yeah.
feels like it's marrying what they would really be representing.
Yeah, yeah. And seeing how it can be used with what they've got at home as well. Some of our families aren't well off, and so maybe they can't afford toys and books and
Yes.
all
Mhm.
of those resources. And if we come in, speeches love their resources.
I know.
If we come in with all these fancy toys that do all these fun things and we get the child really engaged and we're modeling and it's a great session from our point of view and we walk away and that family can't do the same thing because they don't have the same resources.
Mhm.
Like, how on earth can we expect them to model and have that buy-in? Like looking at what toys they have or even what household objects they have that we can turn into toys or
Yeah,
instruments or something like that so that they're not having to go out and spend money
I agree.
um, is also helpful as well.
Well, something that when I was doing earlier intervention, and these kids are basically nonverbal, and we're using a combination of, low tech, high tech, still trying to work on speech and language development, verbal production. I always just had bubble wrap, that was one of the things, and we would hop on the bubble wrap. We would
Yeah.
pop it. I would say
Yeah.
stop, something like that. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of like the other thing that I was trying to tell parents. You don't have to have, all these fancy toys. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, look, you can take a wooden spoon and bang on that canister over there and turn it into a drum and go bang, 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 bang. So absolutely, I
Yeah.
agree with you. And then tie that into the symbols on either the low tech or the high tech device.
Yeah.
I think another thing that when I keep going back to normal language acquisition, right, which is actions really convey the majority of the meaning, right? And so I really focus a lot on actions because that's another way to get the child using their body to produce something
Yeah.
rather than just looking and pointing. And so, if we're playing charades and, I'm doing something and then they're modeling the action and then we're showing it on the device, there's all this multimodality physical instruction going on that isn't just about using your Peter pointer, So I really try to get that going. And I also really pay attention to early cognates, the on, off, up, down, stop, go. Those pairs of words really are helpful. And particularly if a parent has a child that learned language normally, kind of showing them and telling them about these kind of early words. It's like, yes, you're right. My daughter's first thing she did was lift up her arms and go, to indicate up. So I just definitely do try to do some, instruction about what are things that might be the most vital or the easiest for your child to learn. And that's after, the ones that are the most important. I think another critical thing, irrespective of what kind of game or what kind of interaction or what kind of book you're playing, is that the interaction is the key. Training the device is not the key. The interaction is what we're going for. And I often emphasize with parents, maybe one of the first things we're going to do when we're playing is just teach the concept of more. Most little kids at least have seen the sign for more. Well, this is what the sign looks like on our iPad,
Yeah.
And do you want more action? Do you want more of something? So that's one of the things that I think parents don't quite understand, is that you don't have to teach every single icon on the page or in a folder or in a category. What we do is we start teaching some preeminent ones, and that teaches the child this symbol equivalency. And they start recognizing, oh, that thing on the device is represented in my world. If I pick that, I have a voice, I have an ability to say something. So that's another approach I take with parents, because sometimes if they look at a device, they're going to go, oh my goodness, look at all these words. It's like, no, you don't have to teach all those words.
No.
So, those are some thoughts.
And we learn language naturally in those natural conversations anyway. So you don't need to sit there and directly, explicitly teach what does this symbol mean and where does it match up in our worlds. All of that happens indirectly in our natural interactions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so that's why, I'll say, let's add to what you're saying, not add more of what you need to do. We're just adding this into what you're already saying. And it's not an extra for you.
One of my funnest things to do is really kind of let parents know that sometimes, a child not knowing where something is and just being kind of creative and just sort of symbolically making something up, that is the highest form of AAC use as far as I'm concerned, right? And one of my students this past week, I don't know why he couldn't find cracker on his device. I don't know what had happened, or maybe it was the cracker represented, he didn't like the way it looked or whatever. But anyway, he went to the shapes page and he pointed to a rectangle, and the IA that was working with him had said, oh yeah, that's a rectangle. And then a student that was sitting at the table said, oh, I bet you he wants a graham cracker. And that was exactly what this young man, was trying to indicate, is that rectangle represented a graham cracker. So that's another thing to tell parents is, just accept all communication attempts, just allow some patience and some time, even if it takes your child, a minute or two to try to find something, just wait patiently with a smile on your face. And, most communication we have these requirements, which is you got to say something within 30 seconds. AAC has a different time frame for that, right? Everything's just sort of slowed down. So there are just so many ideas about, working with parents and just helping them understand that there's different conventions and rules.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be perfect. Communication is messy. We all forget words, and we all then circumlocute and try and, say, oh, that thing I'm talking about, and we went to that place and there was that person and we did that thing. What was that? And then, our communication partners might be able to grab the word or, so if we use rectangle to symbolize cracker and in that moment it was meaningful, we've got beautiful functional communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. And do you have any other strategies that you talk to families about implementing AAC at home?
Oh, let's see. Well, I think, maybe kind of going to the pausing and the prompt hierarchy. Okay. I think most parents are not at all familiar with that. And even a lot of educational staff, they do tend to make things be really direct. And so I sometimes model a more indirect style where, every student working with me knows that I love pets. And, so I might say, I love pets. I'm wondering about the pets on this page.
Yeah.
And, not just saying, open up the pets folder, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So just kind of being a little bit more, indirect in terms of your cue, because the majority of students are prompt dependent with communication. I have, in my last job as this AAC specialist for a large service district, I saw about 130 students over the course of 2 years, and a handful were functional communicators. That's a really low percentage, isn't it?
That is, yeah.
And, most of them were prompt dependent, cued dependent. There are some statistics that say 70 to 80% of children's communication attempts are either ignored or misinterpreted. And I would say my own experience kind of shores up those numbers. I can honestly see that that's what happens in the world. Yeah. So I would say one of the things that I just really try to emphasize with parents is, anytime your child is trying to say something, your most important job is to try to figure out what it is they're trying to say. Yeah. You might think it's doing something else over there, but really the most important thing is really rewarding that communication attempt. It'll be well worth it. So that's something that I make sure. Yeah. I would just say, the fun and functional activities, hands-on activities, I can't emphasize that enough. In an era where, kids rarely play with Play-Doh, blocks, painting, coloring, pulling out those kind of old school kinds of things, really works. And then tying it in with the AAC, if you get a toy catalog from a store, looking through the catalog together and having the child point to the catalog, like, wow, look at all these cool things in here. What do you think your brother would like? Something like that. So looking for opportunities to just use visual supports, symbolic communication in everyday life is something that I would really want to emphasize with parents.
Yeah. And I find using nature is a really good one as well. Like the amount of vast, rich words we have in nature of bark and leaf and sand and dirt, and you've got the textures and you can make things with it. Like so much awesome language that we can use just by walking out the door without having to do anything too crazy or too hectic or too cost heavy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know one of my favorite things to do is collect leaves, like of every color, shape, size, texture. And
Yeah.
I found this leaf that honestly, it was about maybe almost 2 feet long.
Wow.
And, I brought it into school, and it was like every single kid could not wait to find big on their iPad device, right? It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And then a student, like, big wasn't good enough. He just pressed big, 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 big over and over to indicate super big, So
Yeah.
I think one of the most important things that I have learned with communication, and not just AAC, is that the relationship between, me or my student, the relationship between the parent, their child, the teacher, the student, that is primary. And if there is a relationship there, communication grows from that connection.
Yeah.
And then if you look at just regular communication, what do we talk about? We talk about things that are interesting, right? We talk about things that, you know what, you might find this interesting. You know what I heard on the news today?
Yeah.
And then what do kids talk about? They talk about things that are gross, funny, novel, weird, cute, emotional, whatever's on their mind, they gossip about stuff. So if we want kids to be talking with us, whether they're verbal communicators or nonverbal communicators, we have to provide those situations that have those ingredients, right?
Yeah.
So that really is the toughest responsibility for anyone interacting with an AAC user, which is to somehow create a situation where one of those ingredients is occurring, right?
Yeah. And I think that's an important point around listening to peers and what are their peers saying, and modeling language that's similar to that. I remember I heard a story about a teenager who was learning to use eye gaze access, and she was doing numbers, and she had done something like 9 and 0, and nobody really could understand what it was that she was talking about. This was away from her peers, and then the speech pathologist went back into the classroom or the interaction with her peers, and they were talking about 90210, the TV show. And she was like, that's what she was trying to communicate. And so really listening to peers helps pick up what is this person wanting to talk about that's meaningful. And that was her way of trying to engage with her peers as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think once again, there's so much bad behavior, in schools with teachers being bitten, all that other kind of stuff that, I'm really working on regulatory strategies and communication around that. Right.
Yeah.
And same thing with parents. I mean, sometimes, parents learn, well, a child needs to learn how they're feeling and to be able to express how they're feeling. And sometimes, opening up that feelings page just triggers the child even further. It's like, well, now, so I'm all worked up, I'm escalated, and now I have to communicate about the escalated. That's escalating me further. But, so, I just do find it really kind of interesting that, there's not everything works all the time, right? We want to teach children, emotions and all that, but, quizzing them about, how you're feeling is maybe not necessarily, always the right thing to be doing, right? So, that's important. So I do try to give kids a comment, right? And that's a real speech therapy goal, right? We want to teach you how to comment and engage with others. And most kids in the last 5 years, the comment that they choose is awesome. That's the one that they pick. Maybe 10 years ago it may have been cool. So that I love offering kids an option for their comment. So tailoring it to their personality is really important too. Asking the child, what word do you like better for this?
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And giving them a choice. I don't know. They seem to really like that idea. So same sort of thing. And when parents see it being modeled, they then get the same idea. Like, oh, I can actually ask my child lots of questions here. So, okay. I could obviously keep talking.
Yes. Yeah, no, I am the same. I could talk about AAC all day.
Yeah.
I guess to close us out for today, Judy, what is your number one thing you wish speech pathologists or speech language pathologists knew when working with AAC? What's your biggest tip?
For working with parents or
Yes,
just
yeah.
in
Or both.
Oh boy. Wow. Oh my goodness.
Put you on the spot to find just one.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's kind of going back to that fun, functional, hands-on engagement mechanism, right? Which is this is about joint attention, joint referencing. This is about us sharing something. This is not about you having a device in front of you and labeling icons. This is about you learning how to use those icons in order to interact with those in your environment. And that would be what I want kids to learn how to do. And if you're an SLP working with a child or a family member, modeling that approach as opposed to just labeling icons. So something like that.
Yeah. And I think that takes me back to in the last episode, we talked about how Gail Porter says we want AAC users, not AAC owners. Owning a device and pointing to it occasionally that doesn't mean anything is not the same as being an AAC user that identifies it as their way of communicating and engaging with their world around them. Very different. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes.
You've given us lots of really helpful strategies that SLPs can use to support families to implement AAC at home, and really talked about why that's so important that families are involved, and all of the aspects that we work within, or where that child is within in school or the community or at home, how important it is that that team gets involved and makes sure parents are included as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, Kate. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah. And that is us for Ease Into AAC, the series. So I cannot believe that the 6-part series is already finished. That feels like it went really quickly, and I really hope it's been super helpful for everybody. Just a reminder to check out speechtherapypd.com account to get those ASHA CEUs, and to have a look at what other topics and podcasts and courses are out there to support your journey with AAC. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at Kate, Kate, at speechease, speechease.net.au. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for tonight's course. To complete the course, you must log into your account and complete the quiz and the survey. If you have indicated that you're a part of the ASHA registry and entered both your ASHA number and a complete mailing address in your account profile prior to the course completion, we will submit earned CEUs to ASHA. Please allow 1 to 2 months from the completion date for your CEUs to be reflected on your ASHA transcript. Please note that if this information is missing, we cannot submit to ASHA on your behalf. Thanks again for joining us. We hope to see you next time. Thanks for joining us at SLP Learning Series. Remember to go to speechtherapypd.com to learn more about earning ASHA CEUs. We appreciate your positive reviews and support, and would love for you to write a quick review and subscribe. If you like this and want to hear more, we are offering an audio course subscription special coupon code to listeners of this podcast. Type the word SLP Learn for $20 off. With hundreds of audio courses on demand and new courses released weekly, it's only $59 per year with the code. Visit speechtherapypd.com and start earning ASHA CEUs today.